What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the Goodol'boys YouTube channel. This is an exciting video. This is everything that's wrong after 8,000 miles of use on my Chinese Hawk 250. Let's get into it. First, we're going to take a quick look at the hour meter. That's 274.5 hours on this thing. And then as far as the odometer, we have 7,568 miles. This odometer hasn't moved in a while, but we have put quite a few hours on here. So, like I said, 8,000 miles. So that brings us to the first issue. Right here in the front wheel, we have this wheel mechanism that has stripped out. So this is one of the things to add to the list of parts that need replacing, pretty much like now. So it's been ridden for a while without the part. I've been trying to decide what to do with the bike, and that's partly why I'm making this video. I'm gonna have you guys help me out in the comment section below. At the end of the video, after everything considered, let me know, what would you do with this bike? All right, so 7,500 miles. It's got right around 8,000 on it. I know for a fact it's probably over 8,000 miles pretty easily. So that's kind of where we're sitting at on mileage. Take it with a grain of salt, of course. Based on the last few months of riding this thing, it's pretty easily got right around 8,000 or over 8,000 miles on it now. So now we're gonna go through the list of stuff that's wrong with this thing. You guys will kind of start to understand more and more as to why I'm making this video. So number one, front tire. You guys can see this is the original tire. It's been on here for a long time. It's pretty worn down. Back tire is at half tread or less. It's gonna probably need replaced here soon. You guys know how I run my tires, so we'll get probably quite a bit more use out of this yet. Starting to come into a little bit bigger of an issue here. We have the rear brake caliper. You can see the rubber, the bushings are completely blown out of it. So it rattles, makes a lot of noise. You have to double pump the rear brake pedal there. And along to go with that, we're gonna need some new brake shoes here real soon as well. Something that's kind of superficial that I'm not too concerned about, but it's something to add to the list for sure, is the plastic. The plastic is faded, which, like I said, doesn't really bother me. It's cracked, doesn't really bother me too much as long as I can fix it and keep it somewhat put together, but it is in pretty rough shape. We got quite a bit of the plastic that's faded, cracked, zip tied together, scratched, you name it. So like I said, don't really care too much about the plastic, but definitely something to add to the list. Here's a big one. So the rear shock. We took a trip to Tennessee. We had this bike and the Yamaha TTR 230 on a trailer. While we're going down there, trailers bouncing all over the place like they do. Those small trailers don't have much suspension. Long story short, the rear shock on the Hawk is completely blown out. So if you guys are wondering how long a shock lasts, right around 8,000 miles, especially if you're kind of trailering it. You can see all the oil on the rear shock. It's leaking out of the seal. Let me put you on the tripod here. There's no more oil left in that shock. So at some point, we're probably gonna need a rear shock. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I've ridden this for the last 500 miles with the shock like that with no oil in it. And surprisingly, it's not like super sketchy. The suspension on the Hawk already as it is wasn't that great. So it does make a difference, but it's not a huge difference. It's not like you're hitting big jumps or something like this where you need shock oil. But even going down the road 50 or 60 miles an hour, it's surprisingly not that big of a deal, but at the same time, it still needs a shock. The next thing on the list is the battery. The battery is completely dead at this point, probably mostly because it's been sitting, but that is the original battery, and it is crazy that it's lasted 8,000 miles. So we'll turn this thing on for you guys. We'll see if the gauges even come on. I'm pretty surprised, but if we go to crank it over, nothing. And we are in neutral. The kill switch is the correct way. Doesn't matter, this thing will crank with the kill switch off anyways. So that's where we're at. Battery is completely toast, so it needs a new battery. So the throttle throttle is something else that has recently gone bad. This is due to me. It's fallen over. It broke the top cover off of here. And then, of course, hopefully you guys can see down in there the crack in the plastic. So this whole thing needs replaced. Luckily, I think I have one of these in some of my parts collections, so this shouldn't be too big of a deal to replace. Next up, we got the chain and sprockets. So this is that chain. It's a JT chain and sprockets chain. It's Japanese. They are cheap as far as cost, and they do last a long time. I put this thing on at 375 miles, and I've now got 8,000 miles on the bike. So the chain is like locking up. It's not really in great shape. All of these are completely like worn out. The sprockets are waved. I put a new sprocket on the front, which is the only reason it looks halfway decent. But long story short, chain and sprockets. It needs a full set. Okay, next up, the rims. The rims have never been the best part of the bike. I think a lot of you guys already know that. But let me show you a few examples here. So I don't know if you can see that. There's this right here. Again, you know, the rims, there's something that has partially been caused by me, but also the rims are just cheap. They're very kind of thin, cheesy metal. And at the end of the day, if you can't change your tire without bending the rim, it's kind of an issue. So the rims, they could be replaced or they could still be ran. We'll talk about that more later on in the video. Next up is the spokes. So while we're talking about the rims, another thing that comes up is the spokes. If we do end up changing over to some different higher quality rims, we're also going to be changing the spokes. So that's another expense if it's worth it. So again, we'll be talking about that later on in the video. Next thing here, the exhaust gasket. So this is something that you can see is leaking a little bit. Not too big of a deal. You can cut one of these out, which I've got material for it. So this is kind of a superficial thing and something that's not too big of a concern to me, but it does leak a little bit, so I thought I'd point it out. All right, guys, so it's a different day, but while I was editing the video, I realized I forgot to mention something. The header on the Hawk is actually cracked. So obviously this is kind of somewhat of a bigger issue. At some point, this thing's gonna start leaking, and I'll zoom you guys in to see kind of what it looks like. So as you guys can see, this crack goes from all the way up here, all the way down to here. Goes quite a way. So that's one of the things, one of the small issues that's going on with the Hawk. All right, guys, so enough talk about all that. We're gonna get talking about a serious issue, and that's gonna be in the next video clip. Okay, guys, so this is the big one here. We're gonna be talking about the crankshaft and a little bit about pinging here. So let's take a look at this bike and see what we're working with. So of course, the crankshaft is in the engine, but you guys know we've been talking about this bike having some pinging issues. So originally I thought that the thing was running really hot, and these bikes, they just tend to run hot. They're an air-cooled bike, so it feels like the head is 500 degrees when you get anywhere near it, especially in the summertime. And that's just kind of how they run. They run hot. But I thought it had an issue, and you guys probably saw the video on where you tried to fix the pinging on the bike. It didn't work out. We tried everything in the book, and there's a reason why it didn't work out. So the issue is not actually pinging. That's the conclusion that I'm coming to. So the more I think about it, with all the tests we did on this thing, and all things considered, with this thing having water damage in the engine, that's another video that we made. Basically, the crankshaft is looking like it may be suspect. So, of course, when we got our oil analysis kit back, there was metal shavings in it, which the metal shavings obviously came from the inside of the engine. What causes all that is, of course, the water being in the engine because of the poorly designed airbox. So long story short, at the end of the day, the crankshaft is damaged, is the conclusion we're coming to. And I don't know if the main bearing is damaged, and we don't know for certain what exactly is going on there. But what I do know is that when I rebuilt this thing twice, I put 2 sets of rings in this thing at this point. The wrist pin that goes through the rod had score marks on it each time I replaced the piston and the rings in this thing. One thing that I never ended up doing was polishing the inside of the top bearing on the rod. And unfortunately, you can't replace a bushing. It doesn't have a bushing, it's just a throwaway rod. So when the top bushing or hole wears out, you're basically done. You need a whole new crankshaft. So my belief is that that's what's going on in this motor. That's what's making that pinging like noise. And trust me, if you guys heard this thing in person, it sounds exactly like a pinging motor. So that's why we wasted all that time going through this thing, trying to figure out the pinging. So anyways, it's a mechanical noise. And at the end of the day, at some point, this thing will need a crankshaft. Probably not too big of a deal. These engines are fairly simple. They're pretty easy to tear into, and it'd be not too big of a deal to replace the crankshaft in that thing. But the main issue is finding a crankshaft, which maybe I could get one from Texas Power Sports. I haven't really looked too far into it yet because I'm not sure what I'm doing with the bike yet. But that's a possibility if they can get me one. So that's one of the main issues, is finding a crankshaft. Number 2 is potentially the cost. How much is a crankshaft versus a whole replacement engine for the bike? And at that point, if we're talking about replacing the engine, it may be time for the bike to go. So that brings us to the conclusion of the video, what to do with the bike. You guys have heard the list of stuff. I'll go through it again real quick here. So the tires, both front and back, are going to need replaced soon. The odometer mechanism, rear brake shoes, rear caliper, the plastics, rear shock, the battery, the throttle, chain and sprockets, rims, spokes, exhaust gasket, and the crankshaft. It's a pretty big list of stuff for such a small bike. So with that big list considered, that's a lot of stuff to replace on a $1,200 or $1,300 Chinese bike to keep it going. And that's a lot of the reason why I haven't replaced a lot of the stuff on the bike. That's why I haven't done the rims. That's why I haven't got a battery. I've just been seeing how far it'll go just with the factory stuff. So that's been part of the test, is how far will it go on factory components. But the other part of it is we're trying to be smart with our money here. Even if you're a millionaire, you're not going to be sinking a bunch of time and money into something like this. It just kind of doesn't make sense when you got so many problems. So here's my thought on the thing. You guys, like I said, chime in the comment section below. Save the Hawk or pitch it. But I'm kind of in the middle of that, thinking maybe we could fix a few things on the bike, maybe get a battery, we'll get the throttle fixed, a few of the main things that need fixed. The rims could probably be trued with adjusting the spokes. Shouldn't be too big of a deal. So we can do a few things to kind of keep it going. And the thing is, as it is, it's still a fun bike. Even with all these issues, it still runs and it still rides. So what if the engine makes a little noise? So at the end of the day, that may end up being what we do with the Hawk. It's just kind of ride it as is, fix some of the stuff that has to be fixed, and just see how far it keeps on going. That's it, guys. That's everything wrong with my Hawk 250 at 8,000 miles. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned something. Stay tuned for more videos because we got a lot of stuff to fix on this bike. So we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
Guys, I need you to help me out. If you liked the video, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Also, check out that description box below. I'm going to have related videos linked down there, as well as the Hawk 250 playlist. That's every single video I've ever made about the Hawk 250 in one click. So don't forget to go check it out. It's in the description box below. All right, guys, thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
It's all about humanity.